So Samuel M. Smith, the longtime member of the Champaign-Urbana and University of Illinois communities. Although trained as a social worker, he is employed at the Krannert Center for Performing Arts in the College of Fine and Applied Arts. In recent years, he has had a strong affiliation with the Inner Voices Social Issues program and led the post-performance dialogue course. Sam has interests in community-based anti-violence initiatives, is recent president of the Illinois Association of Juvenile Justice Councils, and sits on the Illinois Justice Commission's Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee. Thank you so much for taking your time to share your knowledge and experience with us, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to make a, excuse me, just a quick request. If you're in this breakout room and you have your camera off, would you consider turning it on just for a moment so that at least I can see your face, that we can all see your face, just for a moment. I didn't wear my makeup either, so if that is a concern, but I would love to see who's present. Thank you. Thank you so much, Janet. It's nice to see you. Anyone else willing to share their lovely faces just for a moment with us today? I'll wait just another minute or so. So I have to confess that I didn't know what I was getting myself into here, but Andrew and I have done some work together here at the University of Illinois, and he invited me to be a part of this. And I am probably the most unlikely speaker or presenter for this. So you will have to forgive me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I do here in Champaign-Urbana, and then I am going to make maybe some suggestions about strategies and practices that I am learning that helps to improve that work. And I do have a slide, huge slide presentation that I'd like to share with you. And it's going to take me a minute to do this. And so you'll just have to forgive me as I sort of work through figuring this out. I'll get it in a second. Here we are. Here we are. This is what I want. So let's see, slideshow. All right. Play from the start. I think that's that. Share my screen. I think that's what I want to share. Okay, so I work as a engagement professional at Krannert Center for the Performing Arts. It's an odd place for a community peacemaker to be working in the performing arts. But many of you may know, particularly if you're in Chicago, and especially if you've been around for the last 20 or so years, or even longer, there's a very long history of engaging arts and cultural practices in order to produce community change. So these are the three areas that I've worked in primarily. I know Andrew, who's on the call, from our work with Inner Voices Social Issues Theater. And in that program at the University of Illinois, I have taught a leading post-performance discussion. And because I have taught that class, there is this grand assumption that I know something about leading discussions and post-performance discussions. And that's going to be most of the focus of my conversation with you. I've also done something that's called visual thinking strategies, which is a way of using visual art to have what we call learner-centered discussion. And I think that my approach to this work around community peace building is very different than the political and advocacy organizing that I've been hearing about today. But I wanted to just offer some ideas and some thoughts and some models for that practice. One of the thoughts that comes to mind for me is many years ago, Time magazine published an expose on the private letters of a well-known saint. And this saint had made her life's work working amongst the poor in India. And what was profound about the letters was her expression of a loss of faith at different times. I mean, she was considered to be sort of a stalwart, living testimony to the faith. But there was one of her letters where she says something like, and she's speaking from her Christian perspective. She says, the Lord, the Christ, did not call us to love the world. We were called to love one another. So I think maybe the best way of thinking about the ideas that I am wanting to share with you is how is it that we get along with one another within this movement? We can even think very specifically about those of us that are in this particular breakout room with each other right now. How is it that we care for each other? How is it that we communicate with each other? How is it that we regard each other? And if I have time, I may tell a story or two about at least some of my thinking, some of my aspirations in that regard. Finally, I work for Krannert Center for the Performing Arts. I'm the director there of Civic Engagement and Social Practice. That has a particular meaning for us now. It's actually a focus and a job title that we've originated in the past few years. And the reason for that new job title is we found that our work at the Performing Arts Center at a major research university was growing beyond the idea of providing great entertainment for faculty, students, and staff. And that in fact, we were being called upon to be more responsible community members and to create ways of making really important contributions to the kinds of challenges that we were facing as a community and as a society at large. And so that is one of the ways that I think of my work. Often when I'm working with young people and even working with myself, I think of this as sort of person-centered, people-centered engagement, which is different than theme or issue-centered engagement. Working with artists. How many of you, just like wave your hand for me or something, how many of you have some kind of background in the arts? You played an instrument as a child, or maybe you still do, or you did some art making, or you quilt, or you sew, or you cook. I'm particularly looking at Miss Miller when I say you cook. I'm not part of my perspective on the world. But oftentimes I like to think about these 4 questions, and this is part of what I'd like us to think about in terms of how we live with each other within this thing that we call the peace movement. Who are you? Who am I? What do you love? What is your gift? And also, how should we live knowing that we're going to die? I mean, that certainly there's going to be an end of our life, but there's also going to be an end of this meeting. And how is it that we want to get together and think about each other for the next 35 minutes that we have with each other for the remainder of this conference? So those are 4 questions that are going to guide some of my thinking here. So we have this new title at Krannert Center, which is called Civic Engagement and Social Practice. And for me, that work is very deeply informed by this particular theater artist whose name is Michael Rohde. Michael is the founder of Sojourner Theater Center for Performance and Civic Practice. And in his work, Michael makes distinctions between 3 kinds of practice. So there's artistic practice, which is an artist or an art maker who commits themselves to making important, beautiful, lovely work. Could be painting, could be dance, could be music. There's also social practice, which is an artist whose work may have some broader social meaning or social impact. The artist may make work for that reason. So there are lots of artists that have done lots of work around peacemaking or supporting organizations that are involved with peacemaking. But then finally, Michael talks about civic engagement. And his definition of civic engagement is practice that refers to projects that bring artists into collaboration and co-design with community partners, local residents around a community-defined aspiration. And this is the perspective from which I work at Krannert Center. Part of what that means is that our work with an organization or on an issue does not necessarily need to be what might look like an art project. Another artist happens to be a Chicago-based artist whose work that I admire and emulate is Theaster Gates. Theaster is famously known for declaring that beauty is a right and beginning to do work in marginalized, poor communities and bring the transformative power of art making to those communities. He has amazing work in the Woodlawn neighborhood in Chicago, making that area a destination for art making, art viewing. He has this really great question of who decides where is the best place for going to view art. And Theaster's work is very much concerned with transforming communities. And this is one of his belief statements. Transforming a neighborhood, we have to believe that beautiful things can happen there. Arts and culture are some of the ways we can do that. Investing in people's abilities and developing space for creativity to thrive are ways that we can demonstrate that belief. Theaster's work and that belief in human capacity, investing in human beings, investing in the places where human beings live, is in some way, I hope, the value of thinking about who's in the room currently. And you can look on your screens and you can see people's names and you can see people's faces, and we can entertain that that the folks that are here in this breakout room are worthy and valuable of our attention and our care and our concern. Another idea that I've been learning about recently is this idea of transformative justice. And it's the author, Adrienne Maree Brown, and her book, one of her books, which is called Emergent Strategies. And Adrienne is part of a collective of artists and cultural workers who are closely affiliated with the work of Octavia Butler, a science fiction, speculative fiction writer. Octavia imagines Black people into the future. And Adrienne's work and the work of these other often young thinkers is to ask the question, who do we need to be and how do we need to be to not only construct the world that we want to live in, but also to preserve and manage this more ideal world that we would like to live in. And so in this peace work that we do, we're very concerned about the potential for violence, the very real potential to bring destruction as we watch on the news every day. And the question is, who do we need to be and how do we need to be in order to manifest real communities, real families, real organizations where that kind of violent impulse is managed. And these are some of the principles of this work that Adrienne refers to as emergent strategies. The idea that small is good, small is all. Sometimes we think that we have to have a big thing going on in order for it to have impact, but each of us knows from our own personal experience that a beautiful conversation with a friend or a small group of people can really be a pivotal point in our lives and in our understanding. There's this idea that change is constant, that that being a part of change is being a part of change and facilitating change and embracing change. And for some of us, that's more challenging. There's also this idea that there's always enough time for the right work, that it's always okay to stop and do the thing that is in front of us that is important to our best aspirations. And then there's a conversation in this room that only we can have, and it is important for us to find it. And again, never a failure, always a lesson, always something to go on. Here is another definition or our larger, broader definition of transformative justice. It's a political framework and approach for responding to violence, harm, and abuse. At its most basic, it seeks to respond to violence without creating more violence or engaging in harm reduction to lessen violence. Transformative justice can be thought of as a way of making things right, getting in right relation, or creating justice together, meaning you and I. Transformative justice responses and interventions do not rely on the state, on prisons, on the police, the criminal legal system, ICE, or the foster care system. Transformative justice does not reinforce or perpetuate violence as oppressive norms or vigilantism. And more importantly, it actively cultivates the things we know that prevent violence, such as healing, accountability, resilience, and safety for all involved. So I think transformative justice, one of the best examples that have come to mind for me is when we think about these calls to abolish the police or to manage the role of the police in our daily lives, the question of then who is going to take over the responsibility for ensuring that we are accountable and safe with one another? Who's going to go and knock on the neighbor's door, that neighbor that's just a little bit annoying, and invite them into relationship and into conversation to address their impact on us or in our community? Who's going to do that before it becomes necessary for us to call the police. And in this work by Adrienne Marie Brown, the idea is that that is our individual responsibility if we want to inherit a world that is freer of violence. My work has me involved in these areas around schools, in local communities, also some international engagement. And also I do some work in justice systems, mostly focused on juvenile justice. And then I think most of this discussion is sort of about cultivating personal peace. And I don't think that is instead of, but I think that is complementary to the kinds of political action and advocacy actions that we want to take. So I want to take just a break from talking for a moment. I'm going to ask you to do what you see on the screen. This sort of gets to the question of who are you? So if you have a piece of paper by you, and maybe in the interest of time, we won't do the entire exercise. But what I'd like you to do is just make a list of your 5 closest collaborators. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and I'll come back to it. So make a list of your 5 closest collaborators, and we can focus it around peace work, right? Like, so when I do community-based work, I have one friend who runs an organization in Urbana, and I can call him for anything. So that's what I want you to do. There's another organization which is called the Independent Media Center. It's a local progressive organization. I can call them for anything. So just a list of 5, just really quickly. I want you to do that, and you can think of the individual person that you connect with there. My lived experience is that organizations have relationships through people, right? You meet someone that works at an organization, you develop a relationship with each other. You may begin to develop policies and practices and histories and activities, but so much of that comes through individual people that you're connected with. If you have your list of 5, just wiggle your hand for me. Up until an hour ago, I thought we were going to be in person. So just imagine we're in a big room and we're sitting with each other. Didn't dawn on me we're online. So now what I'd like you to do when you have your list is I want you to think about some ways that you are like your collaborators and ways that you are unlike your collaborators. So I'm just going to throw out maybe 5 or 6. So for example, think about your first collaborator in terms of gender. Do you identify as the same gender? In terms of race, your first collaborator, are you the same race? In terms of sexual orientation, are you the same orientation? And you can put a D for different or an S for the same. It doesn't matter. This is really just to get us thinking. And what about in terms of social class, in terms of your income level or your education level, how you define social class? Are your collaborators, that first collaborator, the same or different? What about sexual orientation? Is that first collaborator same sexual orientation? What about political perspective? And maybe even political party? Is that collaborator the first? Is that collaborator more likely the same political party or a different political party? So what I would do is I would ask us to go through each of our closest collaborators, right? And ask those questions. So I think you get the point of the exercise, right? So I'm just going to ask you just to take a moment and just to reflect on that. What did you learn from just thinking about that? Forgive me, Janet, but I see your wheels were turning about a second ago and you were nodding your head. So if you don't mind, if you had a thought or reaction, would you share?
Hi. Yeah, my reaction to what I am reflecting on here is very frustrated. I think,
Isn't it amazing?
yeah, it's frustrating, and it's something I've been aware of. But especially in Chicago, it seems very difficult to break out of your I don't know what would you call it. I know there's a name for it, but anyway.
Well, maybe social identity.
Yeah.
Right. Like, could you imagine, like Janet, could you imagine you and I walking into some place, like walking into, I don't know if you're a churchgoer, but walking into your synagogue or walking into my church or going out together to I don't know, we don't do disco anymore, right? Right.
I do.
Like right? People would be like saying like, what are they doing together, right? Like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but the sad part about it is it would seem, I mean, for me, it would seem very comfortable, but
Absolutely.
just such a town that's so segregated, and it's
Absolutely
hard. It's hard. Even people, when they really want to get together in that, and you see, it's like a constant struggle to kind of keep connections with people from different neighborhoods and everything.
Absolutely. Someone else? Linda?
When I pulled up the gallery earlier today, what I think I noticed, and it's related to this, is that Sam, you and one or two other people are visually non-white. There may be many others who identify as non-white in my generation or approximately. You're probably not as old as I am. And yet among the leaders of the young people,
I don't know, Linda, I look really good for my age.
I can't say that about myself, but.
Well, I would say that about you, whatever it is.
I guess I'm feeling my age because I'm not working. But among the young people who've organized this meeting today, that's not the case. That ratio of white to non-white is not the case. And on the one hand, I'm very excited, and on the other hand, I'm as ashamed as I can be, because my husband and I have done what we could before we had children. That's a confession, to live in mixed race and non-white communities. We lived, that was our life. That was our commitment. And we had a child and we wanted her to go to the best possible schools. And that wasn't the west side or the south side of Chicago. And that's really sad. But it's also good. The young people are doing better at this.
They are.
They are. And so on the one hand, that's very good. Then I made my list. And of course, I'm no longer as active as I once was. There's only one non-white person in my list, and he lives in Sri Lanka. And we're in touch a lot. And I would talk to him about anything, but we're not politically the same. And he's the only, gender non-conforming person in my list of my closest people. It's like no matter what I did all my life, here we are. It's partly affected by not going to church. Our church, which is predominantly white is working hard to deal with whiteism and, personal white supremacy issues. But that doesn't mean that we have a lot of non-white people in our midst. We have some.
Right.
So,
well,
anyway,
what I would, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just feeling like it's a mixed reaction of delight to see young people leading this, and at the same time shame that I haven't got farther in my long life.
Right. Well, what I would offer is you can insert the descriptor, whatever descriptor you want, but I would you can insert whatever descriptor you want. I'm going to use white people since you talked about whiteness. And what I'm going to say is white people are, all right, white people are racist by design, not necessarily by desire. So there's a reason that we are racially segregated. There's design to that. The same thing is true in terms of gender,
Class.
right? There's design. It's also true in terms of class, right? So, I mean, I'm part of the, I think I'm part of the middle class. My bank account wouldn't say that, but I think I'm supposed to be part of the middle class, and the society is very well designed so that my interest and the interest of the ruling class and the interest of whoever's in the working class don't always align, right? And so this feeling that we have, this experience that we have of being in a box, some boxes are more comfortable. For me as a man, my black man box is more comfortable than a black female box. From my perspective, I think that's true, right? I have male privilege in that black male box. What about other responses to that exercise of beginning to look at how you're alike or how you're different? Ms. Miller, did you want to say something? And I'll tell you why I said something about you and cooking, if you want to hear that at some point.
I'm not sure that my connection is the best, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, your audio is not.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we'll bear with you. Yeah, please.
Yeah, please. I was going to try to attempt to type it in the chat, but
okay.
I do feel like the majority type in the chat instead.
Yeah, you should put it in the chat because the audio is really bad. Yeah.
Normally I don't have these problems. I apologize.
Okay.
I'll just put it in the chat.
All right. And I'm seeing, is it Rose Teresa Nolte?
Sister Rose.
Senora? Sister?
Sister Rose. But you're muted.
Sister Rose?
Yes,
Oh, there you go.
I think my reaction, I'm belonging to an international community. So we're from, you name it, we are part of that. But I think you said for collaborating for peace, one of my first one is that many of them are with groups. For example, the Little Friends of Peace, which teaches inner peace and different strategies for doing that. And I have been working with her in terms of helping some of our sisters. For example, next week, one of our sisters is going to Uganda to the refugee camp there. And she's going to take that thing. So maybe some of mine are more on terms of maybe work level than just necessarily peace level. But I would agree with you, what you're saying. We are so isolated in terms of relationships and in terms of being able to reach out hand in hand with others.
So I am very, Andrew and I were in this theater group together, and we were using theater as a tool for agitation, education, and I'm very interested in that human technology. And I think that's part of the reason that I was invited here. So I want to do something with you. And again, I'm gonna jump around in the technology a little bit. So I'm gonna ask you to bear with me. And there's no way, Jacopo, would you tell me how to pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah, it's Jacopo, as if like the first letter were Y.
Jacopo.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jacopo. Thank you so much for that. So I'm gonna go back to my screen and I'm gonna share something. I'm gonna try to share something again. I know I've only got 9 minutes left. There's no way we're gonna get through what all of the stuff that I prepared, but just bear with me for a moment here. I'm gonna give you one more exercise. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes? All right. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you something, the next slide. And what I want you to do is I'm going to give you just a few seconds to read it. Okay. So 3, 2, 1. There's the slide. I think you all may have the same sentence. Maybe it's sophisticated enough that you don't have the same thing. Can you read that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put that slide back up maybe for 20 seconds or so. And what I want you to do is I want you to count one particular letter in that slide. Let's do that. Let's count the F's. So what I want you to do is I want you to count the number of F's that are in that sentence. Okay? There we go. I'm going to give you a few more seconds and I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, what'd you come up with? Linda, how many?
5.
Miss Miller, how many? 3. Jacopo, how many?
2. I don't know.
All right.
Good answer.
Sister Rose?
6.
Mr. Is it Cole?
Kale, like the vegetable. You call me Bill.
Kale.
Thank you much. I got 2. I'm counting the letter
Okay.
F. I don't know if we're all on the same page. Let's proceed.
All right, Mr. White. 5. Miss Gia Grassi.
3.
Is that a lovely Italian name?
Well, it's Italian.
Miss Laris, Alma R. Laris. Okay. Jamal Shafi.
4.
Okay. Yes. Jamal.
Said 4.
Okay. Said 4. Okay. So here's the surprise. Okay. You all had the same sentence. It's in black and white. You can all read. You all know what the letter F looks like. I'm going to put it up for you once more. And what's probably going to happen is you're going to count again and you're going to get a different number. So there you go. You can count it. Give you just a few seconds.
3, 4. Only
A few more
sister,
seconds.
only sister
more.
Rose got it right.
Only
Sister Rose got it right.
What'd you get, Sister Rose? How many?
I had 6.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to give you a hint. I call
7.
this the 7F exercise.
Oh, no.
I still don't see the 7.
All right. I'm going to show you. I'm going to try to show you. Okay. So, because you can read, you don't often read OF as off. You read it as of.
Oh, yeah, 6, 7.
So because you can read, there are these 1, 2, 3, 4 F's that you often miss. And then there's another additional 1, 2, 3 F's for a total of 7. We've only got 3 minutes left, and I've got about 15 more slides. Let me tell you what I think why that exercise works like that. I've done this for 15 years or so, using that same sentence with all kinds of groups, from kindergartners through college professors, and no matter what group you're in, some people will count 5, some people will count 7, some people will count 3. What we think is that, well, one explanation is because you can read, you don't sound out every syllable, every vowel, you don't count every letter. That would not be an effective way of reading. So you read it and you make this particular mistake. The lesson in that, for us thinking about human technology, is that there are mistakes that we make that are not just because we lack a capacity, but there are mistakes that we may make because we may have some capacity. And what I wanted to, I'm gonna maybe just zip through very quickly some other slides with you, just to give you a sense of what I wanted to talk about. But the focus of this was around what is effective collaboration or compassionate collaboration. And I would ask you to think about, what were you hoping that you might learn or talk about or think about in this particular breakout? And I'd also ask you to think about, where does your individual circumstances for challenging communication arise? Where are the hard places for you? For me, that's always interpersonal. It's always that always involves other people, whether we're in the same political arena or different political arena. For me, it's always about, how do I navigate this relationship with human beings? And so if we had time, and actually I'm going to ask you just to think about this, is what are skills that you bring to this work as a peacemaker, in particular, the communication skills that you bring? If we had more time, we would share that list of skills that we identify for ourselves individually, and see how looking at someone else's list might change how we think about ourselves. Underlying that is this idea that we do our best work when we focus on what our best capacities are, even though those capacities can sometimes create errors for us. I would also say that communication is based on recognizing that we as people are driven by our needs, emotional needs, psychological needs, needs for safety, needs for security, needs for belonging, need for status, that our feelings, emotional feelings, energy operates on our decision-making, on our understanding. The last few years, there's been so much information about the impact of trauma on brain functioning, and it's fairly widely accepted that our brains work in particular ways, and in instances where we are traumatized, if you think about this as your brain, and this is your thinking brain, when we experience trauma, what happens is our some folks call it your reptilian brain or your emotional brain, we operate out of this. I would suggest to you that in many, many instances, when we are talking with each other, negotiating with each other, that we're not necessarily operating out of our thinking brain, that we're operating out of our emotional brain. And I would suggest that a part of compassionate conversation is recognizing that about ourselves, understanding that about ourselves, understanding how we move from our emotional reactive brain to our thinking brain, especially when there's such important work to do. And then also understanding that about other people. And so with that, I'm going to end and apologize that I didn't get through all of the slides. And but thank you so very much. Please take my name, my number. Janet, we're gonna go discoing. We're gonna walk into the oddest places and make people